AI is transforming how developers work, but so many people are still sleeping on its potential. Do you realize just how much AI can supercharge your workflow? In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to combine powerful AI tools to unlock almost unlimited productivity. And I'll show you the exact workflow I use for most of my new projects. It includes tools like ChatGPT, Claude, and even cool platforms like Supabase new database.build, and of course Cursor as my go-to IDE. We're starting with just an idea and turning it into a fully functioning project. That means designing a SQL database architecture, spinning up a backend, creating a React Native app with minimal code, and even building and deploying for web, iOS, and Android, plus hosting an Edge function. Sounds like a lot? It is, but with AI and the right tools, you'll see how easy it can be. So let's dive in. Let's start with a simple idea like I want to create a wishlist application where people can create lists, add items, and share items. And eventually we're going to arrive at a situation where we're going to have a native application that works on iOS, Android. It can work on the web, and we can even have a nice preview of some of the items on that list. So how could all of that work? Well, you would begin by using something like database.build. I really highly recommend checking this out because with database.build, you can, with the support of AI, build your SQL schema. So you can see right here, I can nicely visualize this. I just gave it a prompt to create a simple wishlist app. And here you can even like rename the columns, make them nullable, remove the column, and you can just play around with these things until you have like the perfect architecture. You can then either grab the migrations directly, which will like generate the SQL tables in your database, or you can just hit deploy straight to Supabase and then deploy. This will generate a new project in Supabase that you can use, and it will be completely ready, set up with all the information about your project already. So this is the first step, the architecture. Then you want to take a step back to your local environment and you want to create the native application. And I highly recommend you use something like Create Expo Stack because that will allow you to instantly connect to Supabase. With Create Expo Stack, you can use different things already included like NativeWind, you can use Supabase, you of course want to use Expo Router and all of these things. And with Create Expo Stack, you get that. By the way, I'm also a big fan of NativeWind UI. I have a little referral link below this video you can use. So I would get a couple of dollars if you purchase NativeWind UI. It is pretty much like Tailwind UI, but for NativeWind, so you get like all these epic native functionalities. Some of them are actually free and some of them are paid, just as you know. Now, after creating your Expo application, you can directly run this with Expo. And I made a list of all the commands that I used. And these are honestly all the commands I used in this project. I created my stack and then I had just a handful of other commands that I want to explain to you in a second. So how would I continue? Well, we have our database here in Supabase set up and we have our Expo application locally. Now, I want to sketch out this application as quickly as possible. So I would head over to something like Claude and just input, you are a React Native expert and what we want to do. And please give me a requirements file because AI can write that for us as well. So you can then just take this requirements file. This one's actually a bit too long and it's not correctly. So I also asked ChatGPT about this. The ChatGPT requirement file was also totally fine for me, so I used that. By the way, if you don't want to use a native application, if you just want to do something for the web, you can of course also use something like bold.new, which is from StackBlitz. This is also a very epic tool to quickly bootstrap pretty much for all the frameworks as well. So you're gonna have a lot of fun with something like Bold. However, most of these tools don't work for React Native, so I usually rely on like my Cursor development and, as in this case, a simple requirements file that specifies everything about our project. Now, in your project here, what you want to then do before you actually do the code is you want to use either an extension or you go to cursor.directory, because from there you can grab specific cursor rules. For example, you want to use something like this for TypeScript. If you add this, it will generate a new .cursor rules file, which is basically like the context given to cursor for all the creation of your stuff. You can also check this out in the browser, and then you would search for Expo. There are actually right now 4 4 rules. You can check them out and see which works for you, or just like copy a few of them or create a new one. Now, once you got all of that, honestly, I just open up the composer here in Cursor. You can supply a file. So as a context, you would say something like create the app based on add, and then you would put in the requirements file. And right now you can actually select between normal and agent mode. So the agent will also actually install a few commands if something is missing and just go along. There's a limit, like after 15 iterations or so, the agent stops, so you might have to say something like continue. But honestly, that pretty much brought up my whole application that you see in here. I just like made 20 minutes of bug fixes, and that is the critical point, because the application was good, it was okay, it generated something that looked like this here. So we got all the things in place, I got even a profile, I got a logout, I got a sign up, really, like all that stuff was connected nicely. Mostly. There were a couple of like tiny things that went wrong. Path not being correct, import from different directories that like had a strange file, so I had to map something else. The routing wasn't perfect, but this is exactly the point. Like, I get all of this boilerplate code in like 5 minutes while I grab a cup of coffee, and then I just debug around. But for this part, we still need developers, so you really don't need to fear you're obsolete anytime soon. Because no matter what you give here, the output, especially if I say like generate this sort of big application, there will definitely be issues. And if you don't understand React, if you don't understand React Native, then you're gonna have a very hard time, like just with AI figuring out those problems. Okay, so after a bit of iteration, we built out this little application. I also wanted to use Supabase locally. So I simply brought up a new local environment of Supabase. Do we still have the command somewhere? So I just ran Supabase init and Supabase linked it to my project. I generated a couple of migrations. So I just took them from database.build, and then I added my own migrations file here. With that, I can then simply bring up my local Supabase instance. And I also added a new function called list. In that function, which you get in the Supabase directory of your project, I then once again simply used Cursor. I didn't write a thing about this function. I just told Cursor, I want a function where people can pass in an ID and it will render the wish list. And the setup, it was just perfect. Everything's absolutely brilliant. What also helped was definitely that under utils, I generated all the types of my environment. So there's a handy script that you can use to create like these data types and extract them from Supabase. And then you pretty much have all the types already in your table, and you don't need to set up all the interfaces. Now, okay, I had my application, I had all of this in place. I can then also bring this up to Supabase. Just showing you real quickly. So these are my rules. And you can also host Supabase locally and then push the changes to your actual Supabase instance in the cloud. Additionally, of course, what does a good app need? Well, we need an icon. So I head over to Midjourney, which is my tool still for generating app icons. And I generated these little icons here. I think they were actually pretty spelled on. And guess where I took the prompt from? Well, I, of course, asked ChatGPT for the best kind of prompt that I can give to Midjourney. And it just gave me this prompt with like all the flags I have no idea about, but I added them, and the result, I was actually pretty good with that. Now, you might say this is not a perfect icon. I agree. So usually what I do is I download this icon, I head over to Canva, and then I do like a little bit of stretching and fitting this nicely into the center. I download this, and voila, I have my app icon. I, by the way, did the same thing for the splash screen. And here it was funny because I made an edit and then I made like a magic expand edit. So the initial icon was just like this, and then I made a magic edit and it magically expanded. It's not perfect. I would probably spend a bit more time, but so far I was actually pretty pleased with this. So if I now go into my simulator and check out my Expo app, I see that I have this beautiful icon here, and when this launches, this will also show our cool splash screen. Of course, all the functionality in here works, so I can generate my lists, I can see the lists, I can add items to those lists, and I can share these lists. So all the functionality is already here. By the way, the cool thing about Expo is that at this point, I can share this. So I could have a link like test app wishlist 1. And if other users would have this app installed as well, I could simply add this. You can try this, by the way, out if you want to, just from your command line with a command like this using the npx URI scheme. So if I would run this in a new terminal, that should probably, if the terminal actually works, would open up my iOS simulator at the specified URL, and we see we're directly in that list. And because I wanted to have this other share functionality, I think I'm now stuck in this application. I had this issue a couple of times before. I definitely don't want to do this again. Because we implemented the Supabase Cloud function, I also added this other share mechanism, which would like share an actual link. So that would look like this. This is a Supabase function that is running locally. I could easily push this to the cloud, and then people could access my wish list and see my wishes here. And to top this off, let's finally end this with one more thing. So we have all the icons, we have all the things. We want to build our application, and for this you want to use Expo and you want to use EAS usually. That is really the easiest way to build your application. So in this case, I go back to my commands file and I will show you exactly what I did. I, by the way, also made an export for web. So you can simply do this, npx export web, and then run Netlify deploy using the Netlify CLI. And then it would just show up in Netlify. But you can also just press W and you would see my local preview. And sure enough, this also works fine locally here. I can sign in just like I am in my native list. I'm here in the browser using our React Native application, and all the styling, it kind of looks okay because this is NativeWind and native UI. But if you also want a real native application, you can use EAS. You simply initialize your project with EAS, and by the way, you can already do this in the beginning with create Expo stack, and then you would probably only have to push your environment file as the build and then run EAS build with your profile, and you would also do this locally if you wanted to for Android or iOS, depending if you have a Mac or not. But inside of EAS, you would then be able to see your builds. So I have an iOS build and I have an Android build. I could now download these files straight here, the IPA for iOS, here's an AAB file for Android. And the good thing is really, if you connect this once, you can also just add a flag auto submit and would automatically push this new version to App Store Connect or the Google Play Store console. So this is my entire workflow of going from like general idea through sketching out the database, deploying it, and using AI along the way. And I think building this application, this whole thing, which includes an iOS app, an Android app, a web app, an edge function, a real backend, authentication, and a database, it probably took me like 30 minutes. And most of that was actually waiting until the cursor agent had finished writing the code. So honestly, I'm not sharing this to show like I'm cool and I can build an app in 30 minutes, or I also don't want to do a video like all these people, oh, I built an app and sold it for $1 million and just worked a day on it. It's not like that. I had to debug things along the way. As I said, the cursor code wasn't working initially. The code from database.build, the SQL architecture, there were some minor issues, like I didn't want to use a big in and I had to use a UUID. These are not the things that regular people usually know. So you as a developer are still very, very valuable in working with these tools. However, if you still say all these AI tools, all the stuff, this is just hype and I will rely on my stuff, then you're missing out on like the important piece here, and that is that along the whole value chain of creating applications, you can use AI. It will help you a lot of time in bootstrapping things, boilerplate code, fixing issues, quickly implementing code. All these things are a lot faster if you use the right tools. If you use something like Midjourney for image generation, if you can quickly ask Claude or ChatGPT for a question regarding a package, a code snippet, or a requirements file. I really hope this gave you an impression of what's possible. I just covered like a handful of tools, so go check them out. I will link them below. Especially database build was new for me, and I highly enjoyed like putting together these different things and then directly deploying it to Supabase. And of course, if you need a bit more support with your React Native application, Check out galaxies.dev, which is the home of epic React Native content, and I'm personally in there with projects, with courses and support to get you to build and ship your applications faster. So maybe use some of these tools during the holiday session, create an epic application and let me know in the comments which of these tools you enjoy the most. And if you submit an app, also drop a link below, because we definitely want to see it and celebrate the success of the community. So have a great holiday season, and I will catch you very, very soon. And until then, happy coding, Simon.